Good morning. In this Romans class, I want to take just a few minutes and I want to talk about Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 23. Let me just take a minute and read those. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who, by their unrighteousness, suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so that they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. And let me just read verses 24 and 25 as well. Therefore God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creator rather than the creature, rather than the creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. I want to take a moment and address the issue of the wrath of God. So here we do see the wrath of God being revealed. It stands in contrast to the righteousness of God, the saving power and activity of God being revealed in verses 1, 16, and 17, or chapter 1, verses 16 and 17. The wrath of God in the Bible is an overflow of his holiness. So we should never think of God's wrath as God flying off the handle, as God just blowing his top or getting angry. God's wrath is his personal reaction to sin, and it is an overflow of his holy character. He is responding to rebellion against him. He is responding to disobedience against him, and his wrath is always just and true and right. We should remember one of the main descriptors of God in Exodus is that God is slow to anger, even though he will not let the guilty go unpunished. It would be the height of injustice if a judge left a guilty person just go free. If we all knew that he was guilty, he had committed these sins, he deserved some sort of punishment, and the judge said, oh, that's okay, whatever, we'll just pretend this never happened. And so God is not a God of injustice, but a God of justice. Nevertheless, he is righteous in his judgments, he is fair, he is slow to anger. So he has wrath against sin, but his wrath is not merely, as I said already, blowing his top. It comes out of his holiness. We should never think that the Bible pictures God in the Old Testament as a God of wrath and God in the New Testament as a God of love. We see in the Old and New Testament the whole range of God's attributes, both holiness and mercy, both judgment and wrath and love, coming in both the Old and New Testaments. It gives us the full picture of the character of God. We should not think of a God who is merely merciful and gracious without understanding he is also a holy God. And this will help us understand some of the later passages in Romans, how God can be both just and the justifier of those who have faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. So that's just a few comments on the wrath of God. The second thing that I want to comment on is this idea of the knowledge of God. Human beings, even in their sin, are described here as having the knowledge of God because God has made it plain to them. God has revealed himself, his eternal attributes, his divine nature in what he has made, so that it is evident and obvious in all the world around us that not only is there a God, but there is the God of the Bible. God reveals his character in his creation. And so what does the human being do in their sin? They actually suppress this truth and unrighteousness. They hold it down. They push it down. They reject it. The idea here is that the knowledge of God is plainly, we might even say painfully obvious in all of creation. God in his eternal attributes, making them clear to us. Verse 20, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature are clearly perceived ever since things have been made. It's been obvious. We see it in God's creation. Theologians call this God's general revelation, that the creation declares the glory of God, Psalm 19 and other places in the scriptures. A special revelation would be how God reveals himself in his word in the scriptures. But the idea here is that human beings, even in their sinfulness, are without excuse. They don't have a defense. They cannot give an answer. They can't say, well, I just didn't know. I did one time hear an atheist. He was asked the question, what would you say if you got to heaven and all these things about God, you found out that they were real and true after your death? And he thought for a moment and he responded, he said, I would say not enough evidence. It wasn't clear. I couldn't see these things. It wasn't plain and obvious. There wasn't enough for me to know. Well, Paul rejects that idea here. There is enough for us to know and see and believe and understand these things. The problem isn't the evidence. The problem is our perception of the evidence. We have blinders on, if you will. We suppress this, reject it. We are the ones who take the truth of God and exchange the glory of God for a lie. We take all of those things that are evident in God's creation, that God has shown us to make himself known, and we exchange them. We take that evidence and we pervert it and do something with it, if you will. Why is it that idolatry is so prominent throughout the world, even to this day? Even in our own culture, we have idols, things that we hold up and hold to be higher and more important than God. Why do we do that? Well, because there is everywhere around us knowledge of the glory of God. And part of the dynamic of suppressing this and rejecting it is we do something with this knowledge. We take it and we corrupt it. We take it and pervert it. We explain it away, if you will, by making some sort of idol, holding up something in life that gives us meaning, where only God should give us meaning, where only God should have the glory. So the dynamic of human sin is the knowledge of God by virtue of God creating all things and by virtue of us being made in his image. The knowledge of God is plain to each and every individual. And we, in turn, suppress that. We hold it down. But the knowledge is so clear that no one will ever have an excuse. No one will ever be able to say at the day of judgment, well, I just didn't know. I just couldn't see these things. No, we are the ones that perverted what God had given us. And so part of what God does in revealing his wrath is he hands human beings over to those things that they delight in. Part of his wrath is his ceasing or slowing down of the restraining of evil, giving human beings those things that they desire, allowing them to go on their own way rather than holding them back. And so his letting them go is a revelation of his wrath. And you can see this. God gave them up to the lusts of their hearts, these things that were in them already, their desires. God handed us over, and this is the revelation of the wrath of God. One good analogy to close with here, you think of the child who is given some instruction by their parents, and they stick their fingers in their ears and they say, no, 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 I can't hear you. And as a parent, I would say, that doesn't fly. You can't do that. So it is with God. God has given us a knowledge of him, his eternal attributes, his divine nature, all of these things revealed. We suppress that truth. We hold it down. We stick our fingers in our ears. We cover our eyes. We say it's not there. We exchange that glory of God revealed and exchange it for a lie. And out of that, God is right in bringing his wrath to us. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you think about this, how it relates to the larger section of Romans, as Paul is building this case that all, both Jew and Gentile, are under sin and in need of the gospel. Thanks a lot. Take care.